Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the Pontani Pages, a place of conversation, scintillation, and revelation. Today, I'm joined by filmmaker Mark Mori, whose new film hits all those notes and does so with the help of one of my all-time idols, Bettie Page. Chances are, if you're listening to this show and you're not a Mormon, you probably know all about Bettie Page, or you think you do. But Mark got to know the real Bettie in her reclusive golden years, and the story is deeper and darker than you might have imagined. He teased out all the secrets and the stories she's kept to herself for 35 years, armed only with a tape recorder and a researcher's charm. And now those recordings are used as the narration to a riotous and unflinching documentary entitled Bettie Page Reveals All. Mark's previous films have won him an Emmy, top awards at Sundance, and 2 Academy Award nominations. And I'm hoping to get him to reveal all as we discuss all of that and a whole lot more. Mark, welcome to the Pontani Pages.
Well, hi, Angie. So much fun to be here. And I see you wore the bangs today in honor of Bettie.
Yes, I do. I don't normally have bangs, but I kind of whipped them up today just for you. So this is my special tribute to help me get into the Bettie zone. So I want to thank you for making this film. Bettie Page has always been a huge inspiration to me. I think she definitely helped to shape my style and my career. And it was just, she was so notorious in the straight-laced 1950s. It's kind of amazing to think about the person that she was, especially beyond the photos that we see of her. So I'm going to ask you a totally loaded question to kind of start this one off, but who was Bettie Page?
Well, that's funny. And that's is sort of what I'm trying to answer in the film, and it's something maybe a lot of people don't know. They just know her from the photographs. But Bettie Page was what I would call like a force of nature. She just, when you see the photographs, that's all we have to go on. But in the film, you actually get, in my film, Bettie Page Reveals All, you get the personality that's behind those photographs. You see why those photographs are so compelling, because there's a real person behind that. And Bettie Page was completely unaware of what she was doing. She didn't think there was anything to it. She wasn't putting on. She had no agent, no manager, anything. It was just a job to her, a day job. But because she was so unassuming and innocent and just natural, then that's who the Bettie Page is, I think. And that's what attracts people to her, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, she was the original pinup model, and her photos have just survived and grown in popularity and mean so many different things to so many people. But as a person, so she was born into a poor family in Tennessee, right?
Yeah, well, she was about as poor as you can get. I mean, she said, when she had 3 pennies, she thought she was rich. And they got one Christmas, they got oranges for Christmas presents, and she thought that was a big deal. So you couldn't get much poorer than she was.
And I'm imagining that they were pretty conservative and probably religious as well.
Yeah, well, she grew up a Baptist and very conservative. I think, there was this personality hidden under there that had to come out. I mean, Bettie at heart was kind of an adventurer. She wanted to get out and experience the world. And back in the 30s and 40s, women didn't do that, but it didn't occur to her that you weren't supposed to do that.
That's, I think, the best way to kind of go through life sometimes. So, for those of you who haven't seen the film, Bettie is just the top of her game. And those who are fans know that she pretty much did a complete disappearing act while she was, at the height of her success. Do you think that that was because of the kind of puritanical pressure that was being put on her at that time? Did that have something to do with it? Or was she just, adios muchachos, I need to take a break?
Well, it was some of all of that. It was a lot of factors. She had been hauled before a Senate committee for ruining the morals of America, a kind of McCarthyism of sex, and she wasn't too happy about that. And she was 34 years old in 1957. And I mean, her photograph, you couldn't go by a newsstand without seeing her photograph on it. And she thought maybe the photographers were getting tired of her. And she was not the kind of person who was all caught up with herself and her career and her image. She was just ready to move on into a different part of her life.
That's kind of amazing. Her personality comes across so strongly in the movie. I've watched it a couple times now, and it's just kind of, you feel like you know her, and that's just really, it's really nice. I've loved it. And so in the film also, she talks really openly about her mental health problems, and that's something that a lot of people thought were taboo back then in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and even today. But yet she was totally forthcoming with it. Did you have to kind of pull that out of her, or did she just go down that road?
She didn't volunteer the mental health stuff. She kept that secret, which you can understand why.
Absolutely.
For a long time. But then when it finally came out, and I did ask her about it, she was very forthcoming about it. And that's part of the thing about Bettie as a person, and that you get in the film. She doesn't censor herself. She's not putting on. She says whatever's on her mind about herself, about her personal sex life, about her mental, whatever it is. She's just very straightforward, and that's kind of what you get in the photographs.
Mm-hmm. I think it is the magnetism of her charm too, because she does talk about all these things, and everything is so innocent and pure. And when she talks about her private parts, I love how she just refers to them as like, well, and it's just, you just feel like you're talking to like a sassy grandmom. I love it. So also in the film, you guys connected and have kind of gone on this journey together. How did you connect with her? Because, I mean, she didn't have an agent. Mm-hmm. She was pretty much a reclusive senior citizen.
Well, I first met Bettie in 1996, and she had just started to surface then. And in fact, I was in Los Angeles. My entertainment attorney, I had lunch with him. He showed me the book, Bettie Page, Life of a Pinup Legend, before it was published. And it turns out he was working with Bettie Page's lawyer. She had gotten a lawyer by that point. And I said, gee, I would love to do a documentary on this. So I was just in the right place at the right time. I got introduced to Bettie, got to know her. We used to go out and have lunch, and all of these crazy stories you hear about fetish and bondage photographs. She would tell me these over lunch, and it was a lot of fun.
Was she apprehensive at first? Did you kind of have to really convince her to do this, or was she wanting to do it?
She didn't want to do it, but she wasn't apprehensive either. It was more like, why? Why is anybody interested in me? Why does anybody care about this? Now, she did not want to be seen in public. She wanted to be remembered the way she was in the 50s, but she could not understand why anyone was interested in her.
That's amazing. So how was it to have lunch with Bettie Page? I mean, put that on your resume.
Well, it's great fun, because in the movie you get this fun, sparkling personality, and Bettie's such a great storyteller, and there's such wild, crazy stories that to her are like everyday things. These getting hauled before a Senate committee because of a bondage photograph, or doing these fetish photographs with Irving Klaw, and people thinking it was weird, and she just thought it was just part of normal life.
And she probably really enjoyed, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but talking about these things and kind of reliving it and just passing on her story.
Well, Bettie enjoyed talking, and she enjoyed telling the stories. I mean, that's obvious in the film because you hear her tell all these stories. And but it wasn't like she pined for those days or something. Mm-hmm. This was just part of her life, and she talked about it.
You can hear that in her voice when she's telling all these stories about these, horrible things that have happened to her, as well as wonderful things. And she's just kind of telling it like, this is my life. This is what happened. And then I moved on, and then I just kept on moving on.
Well, that's the thing about Bettie. What you see in the film is she keeps getting knocked down. I mean, even from the time she was a young girl, and she keeps picking herself back up. I mean, that's the real strength that comes through, too. She got knocked down so many times in some really serious ways, and got back up and dusted herself off and just kept going on with life.
She had a true fighting spirit.
Right.
And the thing that's so amazing is when you see her pictures, her smile is just luminous, and you just think, this is such a happy, carefree woman. And then you hear about these terrible things, and it just makes her that much more special.
Well, in the photograph, we have a lot of photographs in the film that nobody's ever seen before. I mean, some photographs of Bettie when she was very young. I mean, even when she was 12 or 13, you can see how gorgeously beautiful she was even then. But all kinds of photographs from the modeling, and even some very rare film footage that hasn't been seen. So even for hardcore Bettie fans, they're going to see stuff they haven't seen before.
That's how I was very excited by it. Those pictures that I never saw. I never saw the clips with her actually speaking in them, and that was very exciting for me because I've got a shelf of Bettie books at home, of course. So Bettie's star rose again in the 90s with a revival of that period when being risque was really taking a huge risk, and from that revived interest in the classic exotica, and I think also burlesque was born of that movement too. I mean, I think in the 90s, me and a lot of my coworkers were, at home Googling, which we just started doing, and I think Bettie Page was the first thing I Googled. And I think that kind of resurgence really launched burlesque where it is right now, and the exotica culture where it is right now, where you have events like the Huki Lau and Tiki Oasis and Teaserama and all these burlesque events all over the world. I mean, she was kind of really the launching point for that movement and where we are today.
Well, you could say, yeah, Bettie Page is sort of the godmother of a lot of this. And Bettie Page is really a phenomenon of the internet. That was the time when the internet came along, and there are so many thousands of photographs. I did my own calculation, and I believe she's the most photographed model of the 20th century, possibly the most photographed person of the 20th century. And almost all of these photographs are on the internet. I collected 60,000 images of her. And so young women were discovering her and realizing that, at least this is what they've said to me, or what I've deduced from talking to them, that there's this society tells you have to be like a supermodel, a Barbie or something, but Bettie allows these young women to feel confident in their sexuality, to be who they are and be beautiful and sexy and have fun, and anybody can do it.
That's so amazing. And so she was not at all aware of this. I mean, for me, it would have been like 95, 96 when I was, discovering my Bettie. But she was not aware at all of this kind of revolution going on, was she? Of all these things happening and how popular and huge she was.
Right. She actually kind of was rediscovered around 1992, 1993. And it was already, she had been in The Rocketeer, the Dave Stevens comic, and the movie The Rocketeer had already come out. And so she already had a following, and she was completely surprised and taken aback. And to her dying day, she could never understand why there was this interest. And of course, that's part of the charm of Bettie.
Yeah, absolutely.
That, the lack of awareness and the innocence, that's part of the secret to the photographs and why they're so great.
So did Bettie see the notorious Bettie Page, the film with Gretchen Mol?
Yes, Bettie saw the notorious Bettie Page, and there's a little scene in Bettie Page Reveals All about her reaction to that movie.
She was not giving it the 2 thumbs up?
She was no, I guess you could say she gave it 2 big thumbs down.
Oh, no. Well, if anybody knows which way the thumb should go on that, I think it would be her. So now I'd like to play a short clip from the film where the listeners can actually hear Bettie's voice, which I loved. It was a very comforting voice. So do you want to talk a little bit about what's happening in this clip?
Well, yeah, this is early on in Bettie's life, and of course she narrates the whole movie. She tells it. This is the one and only time she tells her own story from her point of view. Nobody's telling it for her, like has happened in so many other ways. And this is early on in her career when she's in New York and trying to break into modeling, but has not been successful. So this is really the story of how she's discovered.
Okay, let's hear it.
In October 1950, I was walking out on Coney Island. Nobody was on the beach in that area except this black fellow, Jerry Tibbs. He gave me his card, and he said, I'm a Brooklyn policeman. He said, I think you'd make a good pinup model. He said, I have a studio. If you'll come over there free of charge, I'll make you up a portfolio that you can take around to the studios. I posed in a couple of bikinis of his. But he said, Bettie, have you ever tried to wear bangs? He said, you have a very high forehead. I think you'd look good in bangs. So I went home and cut me some. And I've been wearing them ever since. It's sort of been a trademark of mine. I'm still wearing them.
So there we hear Bettie kind of talking about her iconic bangs, which, I think bangs are as popular as they are because Bettie Page wore them so well.
Well, she's identified with the look of bangs that even today people like Katy Perry and so forth say they're inspired by Bettie Page. But, when people first hear Bettie's voice, they're surprised because that's not the voice you imagine.
Oh, God,
goes
not
with
at all.
Those photographs.
No, not at all.
It's a gravelly voice. It's got a strong Southern drawl. And, of course, she's older when she's saying all this. But the personality is all there.
I love it. So what was the process of making this film like for you? I mean, I know this is a different kind of film than you've done before. You tackle heavier subjects like the death of the students at Kent State during Vietnam and nuclear facilities in South Carolina. Was this more fun?
Well, of course, yes. I've done all these kind of serious political films, and those won a lot of awards. And of course, we're trying to make the world a better place. And I mean, that's why I got into filmmaking. But I did want to do something more fun. That is a lot of why I did this film. But I discovered in doing this, there was so much more to this Bettie Page story, so much more substance, how she's the influence she's had on the culture worldwide. She's kind of this river running under the culture that touches almost everything. And when you connect Bettie Page's name with the face, you kind of realize how dominant she is in the culture. So rather than just kind of be this fluffy little thing, I realized how much influence she had on culture and how many people felt inspired by her. And so that's what I tried to bring out in the movie.
I love how it's referenced in the film, too, that there were all these blonde bombshells that have kind of paved this way. But, we dark-haired girls kind of needed a sex symbol, too.
And Bettie was the first one like that.
Yes, absolutely. And so what was your research process like for this? Because I imagine it must have been huge because she's narrating and you're just matching everything she's saying with these never-before-seen photos and these video clips. And it was just really amazing to watch.
Well, I believe in doing a lot of research on all my films, but this one especially took a lot of research. I mean, for one, there was many hours of interview with Bettie, but then, like I said, I located 60,000 images of Bettie. Now, I sorted those out, and about 20,000 of them are unique images of Bettie Page. So that right there is a major job. And then I was able to get in touch with the top Bettie collectors in the world. And this is how we got some of the photographs that haven't been seen before. Because this was Bettie's authorized film that she said she wanted to be the official story of her life, we got the cooperation of the Bettie collectors who brought their photographs that they don't show to anybody and let me use them in the film.
I enjoyed seeing the people who were members of the photo clubs that would go out and shoot her and hearing their stories and then seeing their photos, which I imagine were from their personal collections.
Yes, we have a couple of, maybe 3 different, they were called camera clubs then. Of course, in those days, you couldn't send nude pictures through the mail, but with your own camera, you could go out on these photo shoots out to Fire Island and places like they talk about in the film. Of course, one of the funny stories in there is when they were arrested one day.
I love that story.
Yes.
But and even how she dealt with that situation, you could just tell that she was so secure in what she was doing and that there was nothing wrong with it and just such a happy and positive person. I like when the guy in the camera club said that she was less afraid than all the guys in the camera club.
She had more courage because they charged her with indecent exposure and she's refused to plead guilty to indecent exposure. She says, I am not indecent.
It must have been really exciting to kind of go through those guys' collections and see all these things. What kind of condition did you see some things that were just so amazing, but in horrible condition, or was everything preserved? Or?
Well, no, there was, when I'm finding 60,000 images, there are things in every level of, quality, and some not so good and some good. And of course, we did a lot of restoration work. We had actually a whole group of volunteers all over the world through our website who we would email photographs to, and they would do restoration work on the photographs for us. So this movie, I would say, is really a grassroots movement of Bettie Page fans. I mean, when I made this film, I promised Bettie that I would not let some studio or somebody take control of it. So I maintained control of it and to remain true to Bettie's spirit. And of course, so it was a real grassroots effort like this in making the film, and now even publicizing and distributing the film.
Sure. And it's great, though, because there's such a huge community of Bettie lovers in the retro culture and just all over the world in fashion. So I'm imagining that you're getting quite a lot of support, and the film's great. I loved it. And so the film's also really unflinching, and Bettie is herself as she talks about her slide into mental illness and then kind of emerging from that. Was that difficult for her to kind of revisit that, or like in her personality, was she just kind of at peace with it and this is my life and this happened? And
well, she did not want to talk about it and didn't until it came out without her permission, and it became known just because she was getting so well known. This came out, and she was in a mental institution for 10 years.
I can't believe that it didn't come out before that. It was I never knew that. I had no idea.
Well, only her family knew it, and it wasn't that she had trouble talking about it once it came out, but it was more the stigma attached to it is why she didn't volunteer the information before it came out otherwise. Once it came out, then she talked to me about it. I interviewed about it. You can hear her talk about it in the film. She didn't, and there might be one or two other occasions where she talked in print interviews about it. So she didn't talk about it a lot, but she wasn't embarrassed about it. It was more like she knew that other people attached a stigma to it.
Yeah, well, certainly, and that's a difficult thing to deal with. But how was her life after the hospitalization?
Well, she was living on Social Security after she came out of the institution in 1992. So she was poor, just living on Social Security, and but then Hugh Hefner was one of the people that helped her out. Dave Stevens, who did The Rocketeer, was probably the guy who helped her out the most in those days, and they were able to. People were making a lot of money off of her image. So people like Hugh Hefner and others were able to help her get legal representation so she could start to get the money. And so in the last part of her life, and she talks about this in the film, she had made much more money than she ever did in the 50s. I mean, I guess she was doing so well. I heard one story she was tipping pizza boys $100 bills. So.
I hope so, because she deserved right. to be able to do that. And do you think that she kind of found peace in the end of her life after going through this horrible period of the mental illness and being hospitalized and just being poor? Do you think this whole resurgence and being financially stable helped her to kind of find a peace?
Well, I think she did enjoy the fact that people loved her. I mean, who doesn't like that?
No, that's a nice thing.
And all these young people even. And even she was even surprised that it was women. Because back in the 50s,
for sure,
it was men, right? And now the fans, a lot of the big fans are women. And so she appreciated all that. And I think it made her feel good. And having the money made her feel good and not have to worry about all that stuff. And, you hear what she's like. I mean, in the film, she's narrating this was in her later years, after all of the mental illness and all this happened. So you can see she's how she is. I mean, she's a happy person, and she's great at telling these stories, and, but people should see the film and judge for themselves.
Absolutely. When were you recording? When were the interviews done that you did with her?
Well, the first interview I did with her was in 1996.
Okay.
And I did several hours of interviews. Then, after the mental illness stuff came out, actually, I did another interview with her in 1999, and didn't not just about we went over. I asked her every question I can think of, and by 1999 I knew a lot more about her studies. So we tried to get everything, and she narrates the whole movie of her life, so we got a lot. So. Those were when I did the big interviews with her. The last time I saw her was about a week before she died, and I went to visit her in the hospital, and she wasn't doing too well, and I just leaned over to her and said, "Betty, I love you," and she just could barely get the words out. She had a stroke, and she just, "I love you too," just barely, and so it was. A very touching moment.
No,
for me.
Absolutely. I'm sure she was so appreciative of what you were doing. And is it normal for there to be such a lag in time from like 99 to now the film has just come out? I mean, was there a reason it took so long? I'm imagining it was 7,060,000 pictures.
Well, I wasn't working on the film that whole time. And it's not unusual for documentaries. My first documentary that you mentioned about the nuclear weapons factory, titled Building Bombs. That took me 5 years to make. But it has to do with a lot of things. There's raising the money to make these films. And of course, I'm producing TV shows to make a living, and I'm trying to do this in between. And then, of course, that economic crisis hit, and one of my investors fell out. And but I think it's good that I waited, because I think now, Bettie's actually hotter and more popular today than she's ever been. So I'm glad in a way that it took this long. And really, it was the last couple of years where I was really working on it full time and really making it.
Her star just keeps rising. And so obviously you guys stayed in touch after your lunch dates because you saw her the week before she died. And was she surrounded by family and friends and fans when she passed, or?
Well, she was very reclusive.
Mm-hmm.
There was she was in touch with her family, and she was in California, and her brother Jack from Nashville, who she was probably the closest to, would come to visit her. And her family, some of her nieces and so forth, did visit her in the hospital towards the end there. But she wasn't really what I would call close, and she just wanted to, be by herself and stay reclusive.
Yeah. I can understand that. Well, I got a lot out of seeing Bettie Page Reveals All, and I'm sure the listening audience will as well. And I know you've been showing the films at festivals so far, but what's next? Where can people see this film?
Well, I'm in discussions with a number of film festivals coming up later in the summer and the fall. So there's nothing I can announce yet, but by the first week of August, we should be in some film festivals in Europe and in the United States, and certainly there will be plenty of film festivals in the fall. And I would urge people to go to the website, www.bettypagerevealsall.com, and they can find out. There's actually showing in Vegas right now.
Oh,
After
really?
we showed it at Viva Las Vegas, there was a demand to bring it back there.
Which is where it premiered, at the Viva Las
Right.
Vegas
So showing
Rockabilly
on-
Spectacular.
Right. It's showing on June 15th and June 30th at the Theater 7 in Las Vegas. And then we're talking, there's theaters getting in touch with us from all over the country, so we're trying to work all that out. And part of that's the grassroots movement. I mean, people should go to their local theater and say, we want you to show Bettie Page Reveals All. And they should go to the website and get in touch with us. And I mean, like I say, it's a grassroots movement, and we want everybody to see the film. And so we're going to make whatever arrangements we can to get it out there however we can.
And ultimately, it will go out on DVD so people can buy it and own it.
Absolutely. It will go out on DVD. It'll be streaming. It'll be for download. I mean, you will be able to get it any way you want eventually.
I love that. And you heard that, guys. Go to your theater and tell them what you want to see, because if you want quality, you have to ask for it a lot of times. Well, Mark, I want to thank you so much for being here on the Pontani Pages today and spilling the goods about Bettie Page. I wish you lots of luck with the documentary. I love it, and it should be required viewing for everybody. They should play this in the school system.
Thank you so much, Angie. It was great fun talking to you.
Thank you. And thank you, dear listeners. You can find links to Bettie Page Reveals All from our website, pontanipages.wordpress.com, where you'll also discover past podcast episodes or find a link from my website, www.angiepontani.com. Until next time, whip it good.